the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee meeting. As I was saying, welcome to the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee meeting on today, 24th of April 2026. I'm very happy to welcome you all here to Abbey House in Abingdon. I am Rebecca Thomas, leader of Fair White Horse District Council, and I will be chairing this meeting. I will put on to item 1. And Kevin, do you have any apologies?
No, I do not have any apologies.
So chair's announcements. I will have to go through the standard evacuation process. So obviously, as I said, I've got them all here today. We have some people in the room, some people online. Thank you for attending. And if I can remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded, once we just heard, and live streamed. Meeting chat should only be used for messages about speaking and technical issues, no private discussions, but please do use the raise hand function if you wish to speak online. I would encourage everyone to ensure their microphones are off or they are fully muted when they're speaking. When speaking, please give your name and organisation. So the evacuation procedure, if there are no plans, fire alarms, I don't believe.
No.
So if you can follow Kevin, I'm sure you know, out the door and around to your right. So I think that's big for chair announcements, other than to remind you all that while not all of us are facing elections, it's May, some of us are. So that means that we should abide by the rules of pre-election period. And I have asked officers just to interject if we were just sort of straying a bit too far into anything that we should be saying, but I'm sure we are all well aware. So if we can go on to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 20th of January 2026. Have we all read and digested the minutes? Are we comfortable about accepting them as a true and accurate record? Yes, all agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much. So we can move on then to public participation. We did have a member of the public who was going to speak to us, but unfortunately he cannot attend today. Kevin has said that he would read out his submission. Is that possible? Thank you.
Yes. So this is a submission from Ian Green, Chair of the Oxford Civic Society, and it relates to item 7 on the agenda, the devolution update. So it says he thanks for the opportunities to speak and says he wants to ask what public consultation has taken place in Oxfordshire on devolution, and to briefly set out why public consultation matters in the context of the FSA and MSA partnership. I am only aware of consultations in council meetings and debates, decisions, partner authority collaboration and ministerial discussions. I am aware of forward-looking statements about engagement, but do not have knowledge of any documented consultation exercise. Even though there is no statutory requirement for councils to run a public consultation before submitting an expression of interest for a FSA or MSA, I am concerned. I am concerned because government expectations go well beyond the bare legal minimum. Ministers have been explicit that they are looking for areas that demonstrate maturity, partnership strength, and readiness for strategic planning. The April 2026 update reinforces this. Thames Valley will only be considered for early FSA status if we can show strong joint working and a credible governance proposition. That's where consultation becomes strategically important. Even though it isn't required, it is one of the clearest signals of local legitimacy. Without it, we risk three things. First, the Secretary of State may decide to run their own consultation later in the process. That means we lose control of the framing, the questions, and the narrative. Second, we weaken the evidence base for our governance review. An FSA is a stepping stone to an MSA, Mayoral Strategic Authority. And the government will want to see that residents, businesses, and partners understand and support the direction of travel. Third, we expose ourselves to political and reputational risks. Major governance change without engagement can easily be characterised as top-down or opaque, which undermines trust and makes later stages harder. So while consultation is not a legal requirement, it is a strategic necessity if we want to be taken seriously as a first wave FSA area, and if we want to maintain momentum towards an MSA. My recommendation is that we treat consultation not as a hurdle, but as an opportunity to build legitimacy, strengthen our case, and demonstrate that the Thames Valley is ready with responsibilities that come with deeper devolution. It goes on to finish, the Oxford Civic Society will be pleased to support public consultations in devolution.
Thank you. Now, I believe, Councillor Lettman, you have a prepared response.
I do. I'm happy to read that out, Chair.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Green for his question and also for the constructive way in which it's been framed. He's right to say that at this stage there has not been a standalone borough-wide public consultation specifically on devolution. That is deliberate, and it reflects both the current position we're in and the guidance that we've received from government. At present, Oxfordshire and our partners across the Thames Valley have submitted an expression of interest. That is not a decision, it's not a commitment to a particular model, and it doesn't create a new authority. Government has not yet announced which areas will be invited into the next phase of the programme, nor what form that phase will take. In that context, we believe it would be premature to launch a full public consultation on structures, powers, or governance arrangements that are not yet settled and may not ultimately proceed. Doing so now risks creating uncertainty, overstating what is being proposed, or consulting on options that later turn out not to be available. That said, I want to be very clear on 3 points. First, although public consultation is not a statutory requirement at the expression of interest stage, this group fully recognises the importance of public engagement and local legitimacy in any future devolution proposal. Second, engagement has already taken place in appropriate ways at this early stage through council decision-making in public, through scrutiny, partner authority discussions, and dialogue with government. These steps are about testing readiness and partnership working, which is precisely what an expression of interest is intended to demonstrate. Third, and most importantly, should government confirm that the Thames Valley is invited to move forward, the council, that's to say Oxfordshire County Council, and indeed the leaders in this meeting, fully expect that meaningful and proportionate public engagement would be a core part of that next phase. At that point, there would be clarity on the scope, the options, and the questions that residents and stakeholders are being asked to consider. We agree that consultation should not be treated as a hurdle, but as an opportunity to build understanding, to test assumptions, and strengthen any future proposals. We also agree that engagement should be well designed, focused on the right issues, and undertaken at the right time when it can genuinely influence outcomes. So in summary, we are taking a careful, staged approach. We are not rushing ahead of government's decision, but nor are we dismissing the importance of engagement. If and when we're invited to proceed, public consultation will be an essential part of doing this well and doing it transparently.
Thank you, Councillor Ashman. Appreciate that. Did anybody have any points on that? They would like to raise themselves. Thank you. So we can move on now to item number 4, the Oxfordshire infrastructure strategy. Paul is here and you're introducing them.
I will, Chair. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So this committee is the project sponsor for the Oxfordshire infrastructure strategy, or Oxis, as we call it. And so it's right that it should come to you for consideration at the conclusion of that project before it moves forward to be considered by the individual councils. So in the agenda pack that you have a report from me, which is the report of the programme manager, so it sets context, background, etc. But we're joined by colleagues from AECOM, Yanni and Matthew, who have a presentation for you today where they can go through the project in more detail. So I'll hand over to them.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I hope everyone is able to see our screen okay and can hear we okay as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. So just some introductions. My name is Yanni Sang and I'm a principal planner at AECOM. I'm also the project manager for the Oxfordshire Infrastructure Strategy Commission. Today I'm joined by Matthew Powell, who's the project director, who've also presented to you when we did the stage 1 report in the interim. So we're here today to introduce the stage 2 report to you, which I believe, as Paul mentioned, have been circulated as part of the papers, but we also ask for your endorsement for the final outputs. So firstly, I wanted to remind you of the objectives of Oxis as a commission. So we intended the strategy to be a comprehensive understanding of the strategic infrastructure that is needed to support future development to 2050. We're looking at it from a county-wide perspective and explains that it will function as a statement, but also an evidence base of the strategic infrastructure investment that is required. We also expect that it be a key investment document that the Oxfordshire can use to engage with both the government, infrastructure providers, but also with the business community. We also sort of designed it to provide an accessible vehicle for engagement and consultation with the Oxfordshire community and wider partners, which we did for various stages of stakeholder engagement, as I'll explain in a second. So our commission has been delivered through 2 stages. Stage 1, which we've presented to you before, has focused on the understanding of the baseline infrastructure capacity across 6 themes. So that's focusing on transport, energy and utilities, green infrastructure, water, social infrastructure, health and social care. At a time, we've also developed an infrastructure pipeline, which has helped us to understand what are these key infrastructure requirements that would need to 2050, understanding their cost estimates, and what are the thematic barriers to infrastructure delivery. So after stage 1, we've published the contents out, online for stakeholder consultation that has been focused on technical stakeholders, which was held in August and September last year. For stage 2 of the project, which we're presenting to you, has been focused on understanding the strategic infrastructure project long list, sifting and prioritizing them so that we know which are the key priorities for the area, and developing a prioritization framework so that that's done in a systematical way. So before diving into the sort of detailed findings of our report, the deliverables for stage 2 has included a report which was circulated to you, which explains our methodology, but also our findings of the prioritization framework, as well as 8 recommendations, which has focused on the outcomes of the exercise and a high-level analysis on the funding route options that could be explored through the implementation of Oxis. Some of the key findings that you would have seen in executive summary, which we'll talk about in a second, is focused really on both our stage 1 and stage 2 findings. And that's really highlighting that Oxfordshire itself is facing sort of transformational growth paired with sort of economic ambitions linked to your role within the Golden Triangle, the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor and the UK first AI growth zone at Coram, as well as a new emerging town and Hayford. And as part of our findings, we've noted that this really massive scale of change represents a significant cross-sector infrastructure delivery challenge, which would require both the resolution of existing infrastructure deficits, but also the provision of new capacities to support planned housing growth as well as future economic drivers. We've also highlighted key challenges, which were centred on the need to fundamentally transform the county's energy, water, transport and digital systems, and that's to support development at scale. We've also identified health and life sciences infrastructure to be the major economic strength for Oxfordshire, as well as the requirement for enhanced and green and natural infrastructure that's aligned with your local nature recovery strategy, as well as climate objectives. At stage 1, we've also identified that the infrastructure that is necessary to support growth to 2050 is estimated to be at least £9 billion, with over sort of 75% of that funding gap pending to be identified. So that's our stage 1 findings. We'll talk about the stage 2 ones in a second. But in addition to the report that we've provided to you, we've also provided a flexible dashboard tool for the council's continued use of the research that we've undertaken, and that's to inform your different priorities, objectives and funding streams in the future, both for the local plan, potential SDSs or upcoming SDSs, as well as potential other work streams. So just on the virtual consultation room, so the content itself was published for public consultation on the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee website that was conducted between February and March this year. And this process has followed a really long sort of process of stakeholder engagement that we've undertaken since the start of the project, which included focused stakeholder and technical engagement at both stage 1 and stage 2, technical consultation at stage 1, which I've mentioned, as well as internal review by the council's wider officer team, which has generated over 200 comments at a time. So the stage 2 consultation itself has received about 40 comments. Those were mainly from 5 main stakeholders, including the wider officer team at the councils, key interest groups within Oxfordshire and members of public. And based on our analysis so far at the time, they were supportive of nature, particularly in relation to sort of the clear links of the report to other parallel studies, particularly in relation to the local nature recovery strategy and Oxford 2040. They were also supportive that the Braille projects included were highlighted, but there were also suggestions from the wider officer team for individual projects to be further prioritised using the environmental performance criteria, suggestions for commitments to a monitoring framework of how individual infrastructure projects might perform in the future, and suggestions for exploring investment streams for climate resilience and ecosystem restoration. Some of the actions that we've undertaken further to the comments being received included updating on some of the more advanced timescales of the Braille projects. We've added on further research on the funding work streams that are focused on green financing options in relation to comment about climate change. And we've also highlighted the need for transport modelling work as part of our discussions. So we'll now delve into the details of what we've covered in the stage 2 report, but I think it's worth reminding the group in terms of why we do need to prioritise from the wider sort of infrastructure list that we've identified. And I've listed out 6 main reasons here, but the main reason is that in reality, there are limited funding that's available to fund infrastructure, which is a long-standing issue, as you would already know, from both sort of existing funding streams from public sector, but also from developer contributions. There's also the need to extract the most value and efficiencies from this limited funding, and therefore there's the need to prioritise investment that directly supports sites that would deliver growth, but also those that would meet the government and local priorities. The purpose of doing a prioritisation exercise is also to demonstrate to the government, as well as the Oxford Growth Commission and other funding providers, that we have a shared set of investment priorities for Oxfordshire, and to demonstrate those to residents so that we can pursue the projects that are of most importance and of most impact in a timely way. So at the end of stage 1, which were presented to you at the time, we've identified 550 projects. We've then sifted that to about 100 projects for further prioritisation, and this process has focused on sifting out projects which are at an advanced stage of delivery, which we know that they would not require further support in terms of implementation, or projects which have a localised impact, for example, which we know that may be sort of better dealt with through infrastructure delivery plans at the local plan level, and would not require a joint effort in accelerating their delivery or in securing their delivery. These were spread across different infrastructure types. The majority of them have been on transport ones, but there is also a good chunk on other aspects, including in energy and utilities and in water, green infrastructure, health and social care, as well as social infrastructure. There's also a spread between these projects across the different scales, which include national, regional, county-wide, but also at different districts. It's also worth mentioning here that at the end of stage 2 report, we have also divided South Oxfordshire and Vale of Whitehorse as per the comments that we've received. I'm handing on over to Matthew Pell, who'll be taking you through how we've conducted the prioritisation exercise.
Thanks, Yanni. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes. Good. I'm going to take us through a quick overview of the prioritisation framework and its outcomes. So at a very basic level, the approach that we follow can be summarised in 4 kind of steps, as shown on this slide. The first is we start with this sifted project list, which Yanni's explained, 100 projects in total. And all the associated information is categorized to inform the appraisal and the filters of that work. This project list is then put through what we're calling an appraisal framework, which is structured according to 5 broad themes, which are environment, place, social, productivity, and connectivity. And each of those have a number of sub-criteria. The framework then generates appraisal scores for all the projects according to those themes and as a total comprehensive score. And then the front end of that framework then allows whoever's using that to filter the results and organize the outcomes according to the needs of that user. Next slide, please, Yanni. As can be seen here, those 5 themes are supported by a number of detailed sub-criteria. So we don't have time on this call to go through those in detail, but the framework criteria have been developed over a long time in collaboration with the project working group. They were developed to reflect the strategic objectives of Oxis and the Oxfordshire vision, while encompassing a number of social, economic, environmental, and technical dimensions. The framework was informed by a review of the approaches used in previous iterations of Oxis, of which there's been 2 prior to this, alongside comparable strategies and the lessons that we've learned from those. Next slide, please, Yanni. It's also important to highlight the iterative nature of the iterative steps that we've undertaken to complete the appraisal work. The process has been worked through with the project working group, and it's included 2 stages of review and feedback, which has been an important verification process. Alongside the working group contributions, we've also undertaken a number of key processes, such as the initial integration of all the project data, applying the typologies to all the projects, establishing benchmark-based criteria scores for all the typologies as a kind of fallback position for every project that we have in the list. We've used our GIS, the spatial mapping capability to undertake a lot of analysis to inform the scoring of these projects. So that's included analysis of, for example, the proximity of an infrastructure project to key housing and economic development sites, priority economic sector locations, regen areas, environmental assets, and also areas of deprivation. And then importantly, we've also run through each of these projects individually and sense checked the inputs and the outcomes. So the framework includes a scoring system with an equal score possible for each of the different thematic criteria. And the scores, the criteria scores are aggregated for each of those 5 themes, and they're each given an equal weight to give you a combined appraisal score. And what this is basically, we call this a balanced scorecard approach. So those 5 themes are balanced equally. So we had a lot of discussions with the working group on this approach and the pros and cons of a balanced scorecard approach. The key benefit of this is that it ensures that the comprehensive nature in terms of the environmental, social and economic considerations in the Oxis brief that we started with are actually influencing the outcomes of the framework. The challenge to this, however, is that some of those projects which have the greatest impacts in terms of supporting development might not necessarily be performing better through the framework outcomes than projects that have wider comprehensive benefits, which might surprise some people when they look at the outcomes of the framework. So for that reason, we also added in a second appraisal score, which we're calling a growth-focused appraisal, which simply unbalances that scorecard and actually increases the weighting of the housing and the job criteria. So within the framework, it has the potential to be used in different ways. Next slide, please, Yanni. So this is important. So importantly, in terms of the usability of this framework, this tool, and the outcomes of the process that we've gone through is this front end of it, so which is kind of these filters. As mentioned earlier, an important first step prior to the appraisal was the categorization of all the projects across these different filters. And this ensures we're able to pull out specific projects of relevance to a specific inquiry to be included in a specific ranking of projects. So there's different filters that we can do. So one would be the type of infrastructure. So simply both in terms of the broad category like transport projects or subcategories. So looking at public transport projects, we could filter the projects by that. There's also the spatial scale and the geography of projects. So we can organize Oxis projects according to different scales. And we're using three, which is the largest scale is what we're calling national or regional scale. Then we're looking at county-wide projects, and then we're looking at more local scale. So that's the kind of district or city specific level projects. We can also filter it by the basis of why the project's needed. So is that project addressing stalled development? Is it enabling unlocking sites? Or is it mitigating the impact from development? Or is it for their wider strategic reasons that projects are required? We can also filter the projects by the delivery timing. So what phasing are these short-term projects, or are these projects in the longer sort of 2040, 2050 timeframe, and also the status of a project, the level of commitment that project already has. And then finally, we're also able to filter projects by their complexity and by their financial position in terms of costs, funding, and so on. And then next slide, please, Jenny. What we wanted to do briefly was just to give you a kind of show you a kind of example of the outcomes of the work. So this is the application of just one of those filters. So this is looking at it from that scale and geography point. So we can look at all the infrastructure projects within that scale according to that balanced scorecard outcome. And I just want to reiterate the fact that all the projects that have been identified as important to supporting Oxfordshire, all these projects are important projects. And the relative scoring of those remaining projects doesn't remove that overarching importance. So while they do perform differently, they're all, they're the top 100 projects out of a far larger project list of, I think it was about 500. So on this slide here, we're presenting the national regional scale projects. And again, we're not going to go through this in detail with the amount of time we have, but we can highlight some of those key example projects which are scoring well against a number of those criteria, which include the Oxford Station redevelopment project, the reopening of the Cowley branch line, the A34 corridor improvements, Warnford Park Mental Health Hospital and Research Campus, and the Even Load Floodplain Landscape Restoration Project. They're just a few different examples across different infrastructure types at that scale. On the next slide, we move down to what we're calling the county-wide project list, which are projects that have an impact across multiple districts within Oxfordshire. And again, just to draw out and highlight some example key projects, again, scoring well across multiple themes, include the Carterton Whitney Oxford Mass Rapid Transit Corridor, the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme. There's also grid supply energy investment plans for both East Claydon and Cowley, which have a big impact on a lot of locations within Oxfordshire. Begbrook Railway Station, which is one example which sits alongside a number of other important rail station and line projects, which are also on that list. And then dropping down again to the next level, we have a comprehensive set of local scale infrastructure projects organised by each of the local authorities. Again, recognising how much time we've got, we're not going to go through every project in each local authority. So we just thought we'd just give you an illustration of one of the local areas, in this case, Cherwell. And for Cherwell, we can see a number of projects included in the framework with notable examples such as the East-West multimodal corridor improvements, the Bicester sewage treatment works, the River Cherwell Waterway Park, and the Bicester Community Hospital extension. So that gives you a flavour of what is in the framework tool and the outcomes of that and how that can be filtered and organised. We also wanted to highlight some of the wider recommendations in the Stage 2 report. The first of these is really about setting out how we see that framework being a flexible tool rather than a single static output report. As I've said earlier, the prioritisation framework can be filtered and organised according to the needs of different users. So the second recommendation highlights the importance of joined up infrastructure planning across sectors, across geographies, and how the move towards spatial development strategies will further justify the need for an up-to-date growth and infrastructure strategy for the county. The third recommendation here regards the need to continue active engagement with government, including MHCLG, Homes England, the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, or NISTA, and importantly, the Oxford Growth Commission. The fourth recommendation is to recognise the importance or the opportunity to build on the engagement from Oxis into a continuous partnership with those key infrastructure service providers. Next slide, please, Yanni. I think this is the last slide. So just continuing on those recommendations, we've also a significant part of the Stage 2 report looks at the potential for funding or potential funding avenues to address the significant funding gap. And the recommendation here is highlighting the need for infrastructure investment to be smart, efficient, and leverage cross-sector benefits and outcomes, including recognising interdependencies between infrastructure projects and also the regeneration opportunities associated with those projects in key locations. We also make an important recommendation to establish a commitment by partners to revisit and update key parts of Oxis on a regular basis, given the evolving nature of plan making and the evolving drivers of change that influence infrastructure provision and delivery and planning. And alongside this, the strategy also makes a specific recommendation to continue investment in strategic transport modelling capabilities to support the delivery of priority transport projects. And then finally, we highlight the value in data and information that's collated through the Commission and the potential to use that more widely and in collaboration with partners to extract the full value and potential from this Commission. And that is the last slide, I believe. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much. Before I go on with anything, Kevin will send out that presentation to everybody. Oh, well done, Kevin. Thank you. One step ahead of me. And thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work that's gone into the strategy. I think historically, infrastructure across the county, some people have been a little bit nervous about this, and I know when it came up as a consultation in my council, a few people sort of got a bit nervy, but when they were reassured, they looked into the details of what you were doing and how it was being organised with the data and prioritisation and the sort of collaborative joint working. We were really reassured, and it's just great to see such a broad spectrum of projects across the county being dealt with in this way. So thank you very much for this approach. Questions? I thought Andy first, Councillor Graham, and then Councillor.
Yeah, thanks very much for all that work. It's really very detailed and helpful. Certainly as a reference in terms of local plan delivery, it will be a very useful reference document in that sense. One of the concerns I have, having skinned it somewhat, and you may find that the answers are there in the document, but it is the whole issue of concern over water and Thames Water as a strategic potential partner or not, depending on their future existence even. I'm just concerned really how the water aspects which you referred to, the key findings on page 42, which really just shows the actual challenge that we face in that sense. And it really impacts on growth significantly because of, in housing terms, we need to be able to deliver homes that are sustainable, and they can only be sustainable if you've got the actual infrastructure in place. And what I didn't see within this, apart from the kind of glaringly obvious deficit in terms of what is being provided and how that's going to be taken on, is not clear. And in the priorities, there's only one or two elements within it that actually address it in part. But it's a bit like a curate's egg, really. It really only is good in parts, and the rest of it is really quite vague. And I kind of feel that's something that does need addressing in a significant way. My second point is I do welcome the sweep across the whole of Oxfordshire. But my question, in a way, is with the Foundation Strategic Authority likely to come on board, this is a useful reference and foundation for that, but it will be interesting to know what your take is on this Oxfordshire approach, how that will fit in to the Foundation Strategic Authority. Will it be just automatically taken on should the councils all agree to approve and adopt this? And it's just trying to make sure that the workings of this don't get lost in an FSA, which is going to have to find its own feet as well. But we want to make sure that this body of work doesn't get lost.
Who would like to answer?
Shall I respond?
Thank you.
Chair and Matthew can join as he sees fit. So the first part of your question concerning strategic water. I mean, Oxford has been fortunate in that it has benefited from the far greater level of engagement that all the councils are currently now having with Thames Water. And we have been able to draw out as a consequence of that a much clearer picture as to the issues in the water space that Oxfordshire faces. Now, Oxford isn't a solution to that. It highlights it. It brings an ability to have a structured conversation with Thames Water forward. And it will be now for the individual councils or the collective of councils to try and use Oxford in that manner. That would be my first point. The second point about how Oxford can feed into the future foundation combined authority. Well, interestingly enough, I've been asked and have sent the brief for Oxford to a number of councils who may potentially join Oxfordshire in the foundational authority. So there is interest in the methodology that we've used. It clearly will be of use as we, whoever we are, develop the spatial development strategy that is now a statutory requirement. But it isn't the answer, councillor. It's a data set that will need to be built upon and expanded. But it is a methodology and a direction of travel that I would suggest is positive in that context.
Thank you very much. Is that Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would remind everybody that I have a registered interest as a employee of Oxford University Hospital, because I'm about to ask you a question about health. Just on the health aspects of infrastructure, I'm interested to know who, if anybody, from the health sector actually engaged with you on identifying potential infrastructure, and also how you would envisage some of it being delivered, because we we know, do we not, that we all of us, I think, who are part of planning authorities, suffered for many years over the fact that not only is there a lack of engagement with health bodies on infrastructure needs, but there is a complete lack of capital investment for health projects within the health service, and a great difficulty, frankly, in delivering a lot of health infrastructure that we would like to see. So I'm just interested to know whether you've got any views on that. Thank you.
So I will ask Matthew to provide a bit of detail as to who we did and didn't manage to achieve meaningful dialogue with council. It's probably fair to say that of the sectors which the Leaders Committee identified as being a priority, health, energy, water, perhaps we didn't do as well in the health space as one might have expected. The sector itself has a number of challenges. I believe that the alignment of Oxis to a key piece of infrastructure planning work that was being carried out by an organisation that name now escapes me, but you would know, meant that it didn't feel enabled to feed into what would now subsequently become a public customer, because it wouldn't have gone through the necessary governance. And that may be something that we need to address as part of the key refresh, wherever it happens. I don't know whether, Matthew, you're able to just advise.
So we spoke with, it was actually, compared to other projects we've worked on, like as you refer to, we felt we had quite a positive interaction with the health service through this piece of work. We engaged from a primary healthcare perspective with the ICB, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Bob ICB, also OCC, the county, in terms of their public health. And then in terms of hospitals, acute care, we engage with the Oxford University Hospital Trust. And then in terms of mental health, we engage with the Oxford Health NHS Foundation Trust. So we had meetings with each of these organisations and shared our early work, and we also exchanged project lists and had that interaction as well. So from a comparable experience with other projects like this was better than we would normally expect.
Well, that's my second question about capital investment on health, but don't know if anyone's got an answer to that one.
Well, I think all we can say in this space, Councillor, is that very much like I just said about water. I mean, what Oxis is not the solution. It highlights and identifies the need and enables us to have that kind of focused and structured conversation. Yeah. If anyone is indeed listening.
That's a very good point.
Just a sort of quick question. You obviously prioritised a certain number of projects, and you're 100 or so from a large number of projects. So the projects that haven't been prioritised, what happens to them in terms of in the future if they suddenly become more important? Can they be going back into the mix, or is this just how strong is this prioritisation, I suppose?
Well, the prioritisation framework, as Matthew said, is something that we can use to manipulate in order to draw out the necessary conclusions that we want. We needed to cut down what was initially nearly, I think, 1,000 projects down to something where we could actually have some key messages that we wanted to deliver and manage to not get lost in the detail. And of course, that necessarily meant that some projects didn't make it through to the final list, but they're all on the long list in Oxis, and they all remain important. So it wouldn't take an enormous amount of work for us to draw projects that might find themselves with enhanced priority and move it into the data set that we would use. But Oxis is inevitably a point in time. That doesn't mean it's redundant immediately, but of course the world constantly evolves. We'll need to be able to use it in that flexible way as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Massive thanks. Actually, it's really interesting, and the presentation is very detailed. I just wanted to say that I really welcome the multi-criteria assessment process and that kind of more balanced towards good growth rather than just growth. I think that would be welcome in my district. The other thing I wanted to just really quickly note is the infrastructure gap, and perhaps Paul, you can kind of talk to us a little bit of what makes that gap, if that's okay. So it's 7.6 billion. I think, again, well, if you don't have the answer, you can take the away, of course, but it's enormous. And it does highlight a very significant need, which I'm sure exists in many other council areas. So, but is it weighted towards any particular project?
I mean, in terms of comparable size, when we've done Oxford previously, it's about the same. I think it was about £8 billion when we did Oxford in 2021. It's now 7.6, if I recall.
That's good.
Consistency. The current funding gap is particularly skewed, is the wrong term, but there are two very large projects, East West Rail and I think the White Horse Reservoir, which we've included in that funding gap, which perhaps skewed the overall point slightly. But it shouldn't deny the fact that Oxford, of course, is entirely designed to point out to government and to others that we have a very real infrastructure requirement across a whole range of issues that we aren't currently seeing funding opportunities for, so that we can have that conversation. When at the outset of this project, an predecessor of ours, I think rightly described Oxford as, in many respects, an investment document, an investment brochure, something that we can demonstrate to government and to other funding providers and developers. This is what we need in order for us to grow in the manner that we wish in Oxfordshire, in alignment with our strategic vision. This is the sort of investment that we require. So it's in many respects, that's the key point.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, comment rather than a question. So I mean, I think it's a very helpful and useful document, and I think, to me, it's helpful that we can use it as a sort of way of, yes, making the case to government and indeed other funders for the investment that we need in order to unlock housing and economic growth. I think we need to be really clear, though, that actually sometimes economic and housing growth in themselves will help unlock the investment in the infrastructure. So sometimes it can be a bit, what comes first. So I think, we need to recognise both of those things are possible. And I think it's also worth saying, particularly in relation to an item we have later on the agenda, that the Foundation Strategic Authority, as and when it comes, will potentially help us unlock some of the investments that might be used for this. So we have already touched on it. I mean, Andy's obviously already mentioned that. So I think it is a really useful document. I'd really like to thank officers from all of our councils and yourselves for having worked on this, and look forward to taking it through council and moving on.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments on this item? So if not, can I move to the recommendations and just to the recommendations that the Oxfordshire Joint Lead Committee note and endorse the final Oxfordshire infrastructure strategy and to recommend its subsequent approval by constituent council. It will all be going through our councils in one of our island. Is everybody happy to agree that Is everybody happy to agree?
Aye.
Oh, you sound.
Yes, right, I'm sure. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going on to item number 5, it's the Oxfordshire Local Nature Partnership Annual Report 24-25. And I think Matt will be. He's on the floor. Hi, Matt. Are you able to introduce this paper?
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Whitney, and I manage the Oxfordshire Local Nature Partnership, the LNP. And yes, I'm here to present the annual report for the partnership. So, as you know, the LNP is one of many partnerships in Oxfordshire, along with Zero Carbon Oxfordshire Partnership, the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership, the Bus Partnership. And together as partnerships, I think enable local authorities to work more closely with external partners to deliver those council ambitions that feature on all of the corporate plans, but the levers for which are outside, to some extent, direct council control. So an example of that for the LNP is nature recovery relies to a large extent on private landowners. 70% of Oxfordshire is farmed, so the LNP works closely with farmers in a way that sometimes traditional council functions can sometimes find challenging or outside of scope. Yeah, that's the sort of thing we do. And I guess I'd like to start really with a huge thank you to you all for supporting the work and enabling the work that I'm about to present. But a bit of framing first. So as we know, nature is more than just wildlife. We all love seeing butterflies and otters, and one of the symbols of Oxfordshire is a flower, the brilliantly named and uniquely beautiful snake's head fritillary. It's really rare nationally, the snake's head fritillary, due to loss of suitable habitat, but comparatively, it thrives in Oxfordshire, and that's due to our floodplains. Floodplains, like all of nature, provide crucial services that our economy and social activity relies upon. Really enjoyed being on the steering group for Oxis, and was really pleased that Oxis recognised lots of nature projects as infrastructure projects. Nature is critical natural infrastructure, reducing flood risk, cleaning air and water, enabling food production, helping us all adapt and mitigate climate change. Oxfordshire's got big economic growth ambitions, and we know that this won't be achieved without corresponding ambitions on natural growth. So looking forward to agenda item 7, I'm looking forward to continuing to work closely with you all to achieve this. So nature's important, but in well-recorded decline, and that's why, finally getting onto the main topic of this presentation, the annual report, that's why we spent the last year and a bit working closely with the County Council as the lead responsible authority, all of the district councils, city councils and wider LNP partners to develop and publish the local nature recovery strategy. So that's been much of the work of recent times. The LNRS is the North Star really for all nature recovery activity in the county for the coming years. I won't go into it in too much detail. I believe you already received a presentation from Chloe at the County Council, who was the lead officer on the LNRS previously. So we worked with partners to create that strategy, and we hosted back end of last year a launch event for the strategy at the Museum of Natural History. I was pleased to welcome many of the leaders of the councils to that event. So thanks very much for coming. This strategy, like all strategies, is only as good as its implementation. And I think this is where the LNP can really add value. So I mentioned earlier that 70% of the county is farmed. Farmers are businessmen and businesswomen. And while they care and understand more deeply than most about the nature value of their land, still they need paying for their nature recovery actions in the same way they need paying for food production. So we've spent much of the last year, and we'll continue to spend a lot of time on trying to get more money to farmers to enable them to work with nature. For instance, in the last year, we've created ONREF, Nature Sector Loves an acronym, the Oxfordshire Nature Recovery Fund. So this is an innovative revolving fund that offers loans to farmers so they can undertake nature recovery activities which deliver environmental benefits and services, some of which are monetizable, like biodiversity net gain and carbon credits. And the revenue from selling those credits or units, some of that can be used to repay the fund, and we can then reinvest that funding. So that fund's been made possible by £500,000 investment from the County Council. We've added to that a couple of 100,000 more, and we're in fairly developed talks with a private investment fund who want to invest into ONREF, and that would double the size of the overall pot. So this is a great example of where public sector leadership, council leadership, is helping to lever in private sector funding. To ensure that all the work we do on nature finance, trying to get businesses to invest in nature, isn't all just greenwashing, we've created Nature Mark. So developed for biodiversity net gain, it's a local high integrity, high transparency standard that requires biodiversity nature projects developers to provide more information about their projects than legally required to do. So it requires them to show their working in much more detail and answer a bunch of questions about essentially how good their project is, with that all being evidenced. So we show these habitat banks, these biodiversity habitat banks on a shop front that developers can then come and look at and buy units from to manage their planning application conditions. It's worth noting that Oxfordshire's got 6 habitat banks on this shop front, and we know we've got 8 habitat banks in total in the county, expecting another 2 or 3 in the coming month or so. Not that we should compare ourselves with other places, but if you compare that with Gloucestershire, who've only just registered their first habitat bank this week, or Hampshire, who also have only just got 1 habitat bank, and that only recently, we're really far ahead in this. This is in part because we've got loads of brilliant nature charities and nature organisations, but also it's because you guys, the Oxfordshire authorities, the Oxfordshire councils, are leaders in this space. Like the councils in Oxfordshire have previously created a policy position on biodiversity net gain before national government mandated it. This created the experience and the infrastructure that's got us into this position. And it's forward-thinking, ambitious policies like that can help create an atmosphere where nature can thrive. And I'm looking forward to continuing to take that kind of thinking forward into the coming challenges and opportunities, again, noting agenda item 7 on this agenda. There's much more I could talk about, much more in the report. The nearly 100 health and social care professionals we've trained in nature-based practice to help reduce NHS waiting lists and reduce reliance on pills by using the benefits of nature, of connection with nature, for health and well-being. I could talk about the work we've been doing on inclusion, making sure that those underserved communities who are less likely to have access to nature-rich green space, that they can benefit from nature recovery, helping make Oxfordshire a fairer place where both people and nature can thrive. Could also talk about the work I've done nationally to set up and run an all-party parliamentary group on nature recovery at Westminster. Despite this being an Oxfordshire-focused role, I sit in too many meetings and working groups where national policy and national funding is found to be the main limiting factor. To counter this, most of the work is done locally, to work with councils and other partners to go above and beyond the statutory minimum as described with biodiversity net gain. But I also work nationally to try and influence parliamentarians to call for stronger safeguards and more investment into nature. So overall, it's been a busy year. I don't see 26, 27 looking much quieter, but we're really proud of what we've achieved. And I hope you are too. I'll finish on the same note. This work wouldn't have happened without the funding and the support that our councils give partnership working in Oxfordshire. So yeah, thanks very much and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. And yeah, I think you're right to be proud, and I think you're right to be proud that we are ahead of the sort of national average you have. And I'd like to thank you and the team and the wider stakeholders for really being on the front foot with this all along. I was going to ask, is the snake's head fritillary actually the county flower, or if that you mentioned it?
It is indeed, yes, and it's the logo of the Oxford's local government pension scheme as well.
Right.
Thank you.
I was just going to open it up to questions, but yeah, but the Councillor Hingley might want to say something.
Yes, just to say thank you very much to Matt for the presentation today, but also for all the work that you do on this agenda and all the work that everybody at our council and beyond does on this. As we've heard from the presentation, obviously there's an awful lot goes on within our county that we're not always aware of, but all this really important work is happening. I think we should, very much congratulate the teams on all the work that they put into that. Nature is obviously something that our residents all, put very high up on the list of priorities and things that they want to see us work on, want to see protected. And I think we're very fortunate in Oxfordshire to have a lot of nature and a lot of, countryside and that we want to protect, and we need to keep on protecting. So I think the work that is being done on it really helps forward to that. So thank you very much indeed for that, and certainly look forward to continuing to do my bit. I'm sure everybody else here on this agenda as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ledford.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the launch that happened. I think it was back in October or November. I think the fact that the minister came down to that launch speaks highly of the fact that we're ahead of a lot of other parts of the country in doing what we're doing. So thank you very much for that, Matt, and thanks to the whole of the team. I know there's a big team involved in this, both at the County Council and elsewhere. But I have heard that, you know, what we're doing is actually a bit of a blueprint for other areas of the country. So I think that's something we can be very proud of. And I also particularly like the fact that we've got this interactive map, where we can, you know, we can go in and see where the endangered species are, for example. And it's been particularly useful, I think, for planning purposes as much as anything else, so that we can see, you know, where we need to be mindful of where we are planning new developments or whatever, but there are actually nature, not just areas that we need to keep green, but where we actually need to protect species. So I think that's really important as well. And I think that's something that perhaps other counties are not doing anything like as well as we are. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Ledford. Any further question point? No. So that was for noting. So I'm sure we're all happy to note that report. Councillor Brown's recommendation. Yep. So item number 6, which is the Oxfordshire Strength Committee annual report, 2024-25. So reporting on ourselves. Paul, can you?
Yes, I'm probably not able to match Matt's enthusiasm, Chair. I'm grateful for Martin's interjection. But notwithstanding that, just to report to note for the work that the Joint Committee has been doing on your behalf through the calendar year 24-25. A report to my colleague Becky Cheshire, who's not able to join us today, is on holiday. But in the report she's written, she just does detail a few points of key highlighted, which obviously is one we've seen today. Local nature partnership that you've already heard of. So just to report to note, and happy to take what questions I can, Chair, or if necessary to take them back to the relevant officers for response.
Thank you, I do. Standing in here, so thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just a brief comment really. It's more to do with the fact there's other illustrations, for example, net zero, which different councils, different approaches, different projects. I think we sometimes undersell some of the work that we are doing. Saltcross is an example of this, where we've actually had the area action plan approved, and it's a significant, in our terms at West Oxfordshire, we believe it's a national significant project, partly because of the actual levels of net zero that really underpin the whole of a housing project that impacts on growth in the whole of the West area, and actually addresses climate change in a significant way. So I kind of just make the plea in a way for really not underselling, but actually put out there some of the really good examples of different councils who have actually tackled net zero, not necessarily through the Joint Committee, but certainly it has actually come off the back of the work of the Joint Committee, and I just sort of make that plea to future reports.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to highlight the climate change adaptation roadmap. I think that's one of my favourites. I don't know why, but I think that's a really great example of how all of the council have sort of the Council Brown was saying worked on their sort of individual projects, but it's all adding up to increase the whole. And I think that's it. I really was taken like that. Obviously, I don't want to denigrate anything else that we've done, but I think that's really a really good piece of work. And I was really happy to see that all of the councils have contributed to that. in some way. So just general thanks to officers, Becky for writing up the report, and for all the work that we haven't done the work that officers have done throughout the year. We really appreciate it, and I think that's some really good progress being made there. So, is there no further questions or comments? I would just like to again, we are just wanted to note that report. Very happy to know. Thank you. Yeah. Fabulous. So now item number 7 is the devolution update from Kim Sawyer is presenting. So Kim, can I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This paper is an update on where we have got to with our devolution ambitions for the region. So there were very public reports across all councils in the Thames Valley region in December, which highlighted our ambition for a now strategic authority. And 3 things have happened since December that I think it's worth bringing to the public's attention. The first one was that there was a ministerial statement which was released in December, which said essentially that those areas which were ambitious for a mayoral strategic authority should seek to pursue that ambition through a foundation strategic authority. The second was we received a letter on the 12th of February inviting us to apply for a foundation strategic authority and outlining the geography of the spatial development strategy areas and asking areas who were putting forward proposals for FSAs to consider that as a sensible geography for their FSA. And then thirdly, we've had several discussions and engagement with MHCLG, which has highlighted, I think continually highlighted, whether asking us to demonstrate our readiness and ability to deliver a foundation strategic authority. So taking all that into account, we decided in March that we would submit an expression of interest for a foundation strategic authority. That's not to say that, and I think leaders have been very clear about this when we've spoken to you, we haven't lowered our ambition for a mayoral strategic authority, but I think we have accepted that in order to achieve that, the foundation strategic authority is a step in the sequence towards that mayoral strategic authority. So we've submitted that expression of interest. We're waiting for a government response and an announcement, hopefully, that we will be in that next round. Then, as we heard from Ian Green at the Civic Society, we will start a process of engagement across our region to ensure that everybody's informed about what it is that we're proposing and to ensure that there is support for this new model of governance. And then I think if we can demonstrate all of that, that we have that support of our community, that we are ready to proceed, then I think we are well placed as an area we have enclosed our a sort of snapshot of our economic case as part of these papers. I think that shows that we are well placed to act as a pioneer for this new model of strategic authority that government wants to bring forward. Chair, happy to take any comments.
Thank you. Yes, so this seems to have taken over every week in 20 minutes, I think, over the last week, particularly. So I appreciate you bringing this, and I'm aware that a similar update was taken to the cabinet this week. Yeah. So I'm going to open it up for comments, questions, and discussion. So I can see Councillor Philippa Riverton.
Battery's running out. I've got some questions of clarification first, and then bring some of the points. So, paragraph 7 talks about this. Work has focused on identifying areas of clear strategic common ground and on understanding differential readiness of the geography. What does differential readiness mean?
Well, I think it's fair to say that in any area where you're discussing a new model of governance, you've got leaders who will come at this with different expectations, a different understanding of what they want from the strategic authority, and not everybody comes to the table and necessarily agreeing from the outset, for example, what the geography is going to be, what the governance is going to be. And so we're accepting and working with and respective of leaders who come with different views about what they think the constitution of this new strategic authority ought to be. And that's what that's intended to
So
say.
should it be differential views rather than readiness? Readiness implies kind of readiness to.
Well, there are differential views, and while the differential views remain, I suppose, fundamental, you are not going to be ready.
I see. Okay.
So
okay, I see where
that's the point.
Thank you for clarifying. So under 11, B, it says carry out defined strategic functions, including strategic planning and preparation of SDS. Am I right to think that that is only the case if the geographies are supposed to coincide? And what happens if they don't?
So no, they don't have to coincide, but you would have to set up a separate planning board where all of the people who were in that SDS geography, or the leaders who were in that SDS geography, could meet.
Yeah, so given that at the moment there's no discussion agreement on the geography, the report says that an FSA will define strategic functions, including that particular one.
Yes, because it has a responsibility to deliver a spatial development strategy, but it has to do that in partnership with other areas where the other areas sit outside of the strategic area.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So that link is really, really interesting. And then finally, on clarifications. Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on Instagram?
I've got comments.
Yeah, we can have comments. Does anybody have any comments? Other than okay, great.
Okay. So I just wanted to just note that these are hugely important changes, and they could be really positive. But there are some things that we need to consider, and so far we have had some difficulties around agreeing on the geography, etc. But I'm really aware that this is only the first, and we may well get many more challenges in terms of getting that consensus. And so far we have been working on trying to build consensus in order to move things forward, which so far, all right, has been okay, but we have had a challenge. And so I think there are a couple of things. I know that there's some discussions around a more formal committees which are ongoing, and I think that's probably quite important to do sooner rather than later. And so yeah, I guess a plea there and to just not wait for that, because that's how we resolve differences, by voting, right? That's one way in any way. Discussing and voting. So I think that would be quite a good thing to do. But I think we've got, using as a case study the kind of challenges we have had and the difficulty around geography is to really understand what are the choices we are facing. And that isn't this is basically because as a leader, I feel really responsible in terms of informing my cabinet, my council, and indeed my residents about these changes and why I will take certain decisions. And to be able to weigh up some of those options, it's really important to kind of understand what they involve. And yes, okay, of course, we have expression of interest, but I think, I feel really accountable and responsible for ensuring that I'm able to make a choice. So it's been really unclear to me, because even in the report it says under I can tell you which paragraph, that informal conversations have happened with ministers, and it's true. I think there's been various officers and indeed leaders as well that have had conversations with the minister, and I think that's probably contributed to the lack of clarity rather than help. And so I think it's really important to help to think about and share information as equally as possible between all partners, so that they can cascade down then that to their respective councils. Again, to enable good decision making and speedy, because I think we can all agree we want to move forward as quickly as possible and provide that certainty for our residents and businesses. And so another kind of point around to be considered following the local elections probably, is the confirming what is the actual choices that we're facing. Do we, for example, in geography, do we have to basically agree to SDS geography, or there is no FSA, or do we have any other options? And what is the expectation, in terms of the minister? Do they want consensus unanimous decision, or is it okay to just vote it out? I think these are just things that would be really helpful for this committee, or indeed even wider Thames Valley leadership, to understand, so that we can move forward, because at the moment it seems like we are in a little bit of an impasse. So, did I forget anything? Oh yes, sorry, no, I did have one. So Annex 3 talks about the FSA, very much weighted around responsibilities rather than some of the powers and funding. And in fact, the only funding that is mentioned in there is that for adult education. I know that we don't have full clarity on that. We know some things, but we don't know everything. And so in conversations with Minister and other government representatives, officials, it would be really good to start to get that clarity in order to enable us to weigh those options. Because I think we have probably a lot more information about what an MSA is, and I hope that it will be an option in the future. But for now, we need to know exactly what we are signing up our councils for. Because if we do have to make a compromise elsewhere on geography, for example, we need to understand why we're doing that, and what we may get actually in terms of.
Yeah, and we are planning for a leaders meeting post-election, and we can pick up all of the questions that you have there and hopefully provide you with the clarification that you need to enable us to move forward.
And on the FSA, do you know when we would expect to have more clarity? Any ideas?
I don't have any certainty on dates at the moment. I think that we are in constant communication with MHCLG, but as you know, they're busy at the moment trying to get the Act through Parliament so that we can get
into the laws.
Yes, with Parliament closing in early May, they have to have the bill through and passed and given royal assent by. Before that. So they're very busy at the moment doing that. So they're not giving us certainty around some of those questions, although they know that they are. We are expecting answers on some of those.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just a couple of short comments. One, I do think time is of the essence here. I think we have already, not been as quick as we might have been in being clear about what our position is. I am obviously happy to support anything that helps get a clear position across the line, but I do think that we need to make sure that we're all of us doing everything we can to make sure that does happen. And I just want to confirm for the record that my council is very happy to support proposals for devolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Sorry, got my word muddled up there. Any further comments? Councillor Leffman, no, Councillor Brown.
Just following on, I'm very clear from previous discussions that my executive is of the view that we should move on the foundation strategic authority, and whilst we accept there's still unanswered questions, we're not going to get some of those answered questions yet. This is an expression of interest, and we recognise that that is a preliminary stage. And at this point in time, our executive has been fully informed of the discussions I've actually had and share the same position that I'm expressing now. And of course, we will actually, once we have further news beyond that, so in the process, there will be a further discussion at council, but that's a bit further down the line. At the moment, the government wants to actually hear very clear expression of interest, and based on the discussions had so far, we are of that view that should be moved as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we risk the government actually not actually agreeing to an FSA, and the MSA issues which were alluded to just a few minutes ago, we know we can actually address that a bit further down the line because the government's already made it clear that the FSA is the next step, and then FSA is next step. MSA comes a bit further down the line, so we don't have to make a decision about MSA. So we're fine with that. Just want to be clear that my position from our executive is the same as Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think my council would favour FSA, but as we've said, there is very little clarity on what an FSA is, what it will bring. Will it be a positive thing? I mean, we're assuming so, but yeah, so we need clarity, and I think it would be great to be, I think, feel as though we're more part of the constant communication, as you just said. You're in constant communication with the MHCLG, and I don't feel like I'm in constant communication with the MHCLG. So I just echoing that sort of a bit more collaborative communication going down across would be helpful. Councillor Lethman.
Well, just to make the point, I am not personally involved in any conversations with MHCLG. That's something I'm leaving entirely up to officers. And I agree, yes, it would be helpful to have. And I think, actually, to be fair, I think you have provided us with some answers to the questions that have been raised around, you know, what is expected of us. I would like to make the point, though, that, you know, what we have to face up to is that we may have to make some choices that we may not be entirely comfortable with if we want to push this forward, if we want to get the, you know, to use your phrase, Councillor Thomas, you know, we need to keep our eye on the prize. The prize could be a serious investment in things like infrastructure that we desperately need in the region. And it would be a great shame if we were to throw that opportunity away. But do we know that?
Can I just clarify?
Well,
can I clarify? When I said eyes on the prize, that was very much MSA. When we were being offered an MSA, and that's where we were going. It wasn't an FSA, because we have no idea what the prize is. And I completely agree that we may have to compromise. But compromise is a two-way street.
Yep,
so
no,
it is,
and
that's why we need to understand the benefits of an FSA. So if we have to compromise and say, oh, well, we don't particularly want this, but look what it's going to bring. And I think that's the clarity we're after. Well, definitely what I'm after, and my group, my council is after as well.
Well, I think that's a perfectly fair question, and I think I'm right in saying, Kim, that that's something that you are looking at and working on. You'll come to the leaders' meeting with, you know, when we have that meeting, hopefully on the 26th of May, that we will have some answers on that, and you know, we'll have some clarity around what we can expect from an FSA. But I still do believe that we don't know what the government's going to decide. At the end of the day, this is down to the government. It's their programme. But if there are benefits to be had for us and our residents, we would be wrong to throw them away. And we need to find some compromises, perhaps. And it has been difficult up to now to find those compromises. And let's be perfectly honest about this. We're in the public domain, but you know, we have had questions around what the geography should look like. You know, some people want to include Buckinghamshire, others don't. Some want to include Swindon, others don't. We are going to have to compromise at some point if we want the benefits that we hope will be defined as to what an FSA will deliver. Bearing in mind that at the moment there is legislation being drafted, which I hope will provide some clarification. It's my understanding that legislation is going to be going forward sometime in May. And that's one reason why I think they wanted to get a decision before, you know, last week or the week before. But that's now been postponed until after the elections. So I think we should get some clarification between now and the last week in May, when we hope to have our leaders meeting with the other leaders around the region. And when we do, hopefully we'll be able to come to a decision as to what we want to do collectively with the leaders in the other parts of the region. Because it's not just an Oxfordshire
Yes,
decision at
obviously.
all.
But yeah, that's why we sort of need a thing about how we're going to do that and achieve that. Because we can't really, it's not so, oh, let's wait until we get to that meeting in May and then like come up with an idea of how to get to the point we need to be at. I think we need to have some forward planning and not obviously just with us, but with the other leaders as well. Councillor Phillips over Rivers.
Yeah, I just, in terms of making the compromise, I have never had anything in writing to tell me what my choices are in terms of those compromises. I do not know them. I'm being told that it's a binary choice, but maybe it's not a binary choice. I need to know what it is so that I can make that choice. So I think that's what I need some clarity on. And so I think, yeah, maybe in time for the next meeting, that could be presented more formally as you take the geography that government wants, or do they want it? They, recently, the minutes from the ministerial meeting suggested that government will not impose a geography, but now it's being said that it's a binary choice. So I think it is just getting that clarity so that we can make the choices that we need to make. And in terms of investment,
thank you, Councillor. I think we're straying.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so can we just call it Councillor Hingley, bearing in mind rules and everything.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chair.
comment.
Just to say, I mean, I believe that all of our councillors endorsed the letter that was sent in from Mayoral Strategic Authority. So obviously there is support for evolution here. I think with regards to the FSA, what I wouldn't want to see is the people I represent, the businesses I represent, etc. I'm sure all of us lose out on any opportunities from this process going forward. So I do hope that the reassurances that are being sought by colleagues can be forthcoming and dealt with swiftly, so that we can come to that resolution and so we can move forward with this because I agree with colleagues in the room that have expressed that opinion that moving towards an FSA would seem to me to be a good thing for the people of Oxfordshire. So hopefully that process can happen quickly and that those reassurances can come forward, and I would urge everybody working on this to do that and to move swiftly forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hingley. I think that's very much where I am coming from. We do need those reassurances as quickly as possible. So when we come to the next meeting, then we're in a much better place about where we are, what it means, and how we can go forward. So,
more points here. I could just following up on what you've said and others have said. Can we just look at the timing of this, because we don't want to get that awkwardness of timing in light of the fact that reassurance is needed. Obviously we've got the elections, and as soon as possible after the elections might be useful, so that we don't fall foul of what the government wants to do in terms of their timing. So it's just to be a bit pragmatic about that, but that's something officers can actually deal with, so we don't have that awkwardness.
thank you. I think that's very important. So if there's no further comments or questions, we are going to ask for a decision on this. So the recommendations ahead in front of you are: one, that we note progress on devolution discussions across the Thames Valley. Two, that we note the evolving national policy context and the emerging position on governance and the supplementary expression of interest submitted on the 20th of March 2026. And three, endorse the proposed next steps to continue constructive engagement with partner authorities and government while maintaining the council's commitment to securing a mayoral strategic authority for the valley. Do we just agree, or do you want to?
Sorry, where it says in recommendation 3, while maintaining the council's commitment.
Yes, that is correct. I pointed that out, and I've forgotten that I pointed that out. I think that's a typo, and it should be very good. Yes, it's apostrophe rather than apostrophe S. Right. I think these were lifted straight from
OCC.
So recommendations, but can we note that that is
So
needs
it's
to be changed?
the councils and not
Yeah.
the committees.
So because we're going, it's for
But
our councils, so councils plural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so councils across, so
no,
council S apostrophe.
The councils is.
Yes. So good spotting, well done, thank you. And yes, I had to mention. So are we all happy to agree that those recommendations with that amendment that councillor Henry pointed out? Agree. Excellent, thank you. So item number 8, going on to the easier bits and pieces. The Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee Forward Plan. Has everybody had a chance to review that? Would you like to speak to it?
I don't have anything to add, Chair, for what's in there, what's in the agenda. It's, the items are listed there. The only other thing I'd say is that you and I have had a discussion on future agenda items.
Yes. They were discussing the points that obviously hopefully there will be a point at which the reorganisation announcement is made. Not quite sure when that is, but that will affect future agendas, I would suspect. So I think that is something that we have to take into consideration. We will obviously there might be some changes around the table. We don't know, so we will just have to have a look. But yes, we will monitor that as we go forward. Item number 9, updates from key strategic partnerships supporting delivery of Oxfordshire's strategic vision. So things like EEH, I know there's been a few meetings. And I believe that there is a written update that I hope everybody see on the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economic Partnership. So I believe Councillor Leffman, are you able to talk about EEH?
Yes, but only very briefly, I'm afraid, because I wasn't actually at the whole of the meeting, unfortunately. But I can tell you that there were a number of papers that were brought to the meeting. The main one probably being on demand responsive transport, which I think is quite an interesting idea, which is being developed across the whole of the EEH region. And the other thing to note is that we had an extraordinary meeting as well to talk about the consultation that's happening on East West Rail and some of the programmes around East West Rail, which are being developed in partnership with EEH, but also actually with Experience Oxfordshire, who are doing a specific study of the visitor economy across the region. Because one of the things we have to bear in mind is that EWR is not just going to be about people, travelling on a daily basis to and from work. There is a massive visitor economy across the region, which this will support. So we've got Universal Studios being built around the Bedford area. We've got Queen of Fu coming to the Bicester area. We've got a number of other things happening across the region, which mean that EWR is going to be a key route. So a lot of work is going on between EWR and EEH to make sure that that happens smoothly. So demand responsive transport was one of the things we looked at, and the other was looking at the build of new stations and the design of new stations, which has been commissioned by EEH in partnership with EWR to look at the style of stations and to make sure that they're accessible and that we've got active travel links to those stations, etc. So those are the key things that came out of that meeting.
Excuse me. Oh. Thank you. I wasn't able to attend that, so I appreciate the update.
Oh, the other thing was electric vehicles and looking at how we can improve electric vehicle charging across the region as well in relation to everything that's going on the railway network.
Councillor Healy just wants to comment.
Just to clarify that with respect to Weedesville, obviously that's a planning application that's going to show up at the moment. So the decision is actually yet been taken on whether it has been approved or not. It's pretty clear.
I thought that might be one of them. So any other comments, even on the Inclusive Economic Partnership report? Nothing. Okay, thank you. We will go on to item 10, updates on matters relevant to the Legal Trade Committee, AOB. I believe it was suggested that we might get an update, a quick update on the Kidlington waste, illegal waste.
Chair, so I'd be happy to do a quick update on that, and I'm sure Robin would as well. Robin's obviously been very much involved in the whole matter, but Councillor Roberts and I were invited to go and see how they were progressing last week. They've just started clearing the site, and we were given an exhibition of how they're actually filling and clearing the lorries, which is really interesting, actually, I have to say. They've got some extremely interesting technology there to make sure that they get all the stuff out of the lorries at the tip. There are two areas of the site. One is they call the Croissant. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's the wider area. And that is the bit that's being cleared at the moment, because that's actually relatively easy to get into. And they've put in quite a lot of they've built up the area in Croissant to be able to put a base down for their own offices, and they've had to build it up using local soil to do that, but that will then be taken away once the whole thing is cleared. The other bit, which is the long narrow bit, which if you look at it on the map, is almost invisible. It can only really be seen from the air, and that's what they call the tadpole. And that has got it's got electric wires running across it, which makes it quite inaccessible and difficult to manage, although they have actually cut off the electricity from that source. And I think where that was going to is now got a generator of its own. So it will be possible to get in there, but it's got to be very carefully managed. That particular bit is also being carefully managed by the contractors for moisture, but also for heat. And of course, our fire and rescue service is still very much involved in making sure that there's no risk of fire there. But when you actually look at the site, you can see why it was that it was so difficult to spot. And in fact, what we were told is they built at the entrance a sort of mound of earth, and they were covering up actually some of the already deposited materials in the site with earth. So it was almost impossible to see what was going on unless you actually went into the site itself. And that eventually did happen. But there's no question that this is serious organised crime, and it's been really carefully managed and carefully thought through. I'm happy to say that the work that has been done by our officers with the Environment Agency, which is now bearing fruit because we're beginning to see the site cleared, has been, I think I'm right in saying, and Martin, you'll know more about this than I do, but there's been a lot of interest on the part of other authorities who've got similar problems with tips of this kind, and looking at how they can work in the way that we have with the Environment Agency to clear it. But I would like also, whilst mentioning our own officers at OCC, I would like to pay tribute to the fact that it's been very much a partnership working between ourselves and Sherwell, and the officers at Sherwell have done a great job as well of managing this. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and I'm sure that Martin or Robin will have something they want to add to that.
I don't think in particular it's
that was very comprehensive.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough.
And everything. Steve, what do you think?
No need to add anything to what Councillor Eckman said, really, just obviously that it's fantastic that it's been cleared now, and hopefully will be clear across the timetable that so within the next it's by the middle of the summer.
I think they're hoping, well, it might be a bit later than that, but yes, it's going to take a while to clear it.
a little bit dependent on
what they get through. A few months anyway, that shows the extent of the approach that's been done for.
Thank you to all involved in helping clear up our county. I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any other business? Let's just call it that. Next. Okay, so we can move on to the last item, date for the next meeting. So the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, 23rd June, at 2 o'clock. It will be here again. And then the following one will be in July. And as I said before, we probably have either one of those. We will have a decision on local government reorganisation, and well, hopefully I'm still not 100% trusting on it all, but yeah, hopefully after all this effort, we will have an announcement at one of those two meetings. So we're just mindful of the announcement. And may I just say, obviously we have elections coming up. We have been trying to be mindful of the election period throughout this meeting, but thanks to all of those leaders in councils that are currently up for election, and yes, we'll see what happens after May the 7th. So thank you everybody for all your work throughout the year. It seems like it's the end of something. So
Flash, isn't it?
yeah, no, amazing. So thank you, and yes, with our annual general report, I think yes, that's a good point. Yeah, and thank you very much.